Henry Spencer Moore, CHFBA, was an English sculptor and artist. He was best known for his semi-abstract monumental bronze sculptures, which are located around the world as public works of art. His forms are usually abstractions of the human figure, typically depicting mother and child or reclining figures. Moore's works are usually suggestive of the female body, apart from a phase in the 1950s when he sculpted family groups. His forms are generally pierced or contain hollow spaces. Many interpreters liken the undulating form of his reclining figures to the landscape and hills of his birthplace, Yorkshire. Moore was born in Castleford, the son of a coal miner. He became well known through his carved marble and larger-scale abstract cast bronze sculptures, and was instrumental in introducing a particular form of modernism to the United Kingdom. His ability in later life to fulfill large-scale commissions made him exceptionally wealthy. Despite this, he lived frugally. Most of the money he earned went towards endowing the Henry Moore Foundation, which continues to support education and promotion of the arts. Early life. Moore was born in Castleford, West Yorkshire, England, to Mary Baker and Raymond Spencer Moore. His father was of Irish origin and became pit deputy and then under-manager of the Welldale Colliery in Castleford. He was an autodidact with an interest in music and literature. Determined that his sons would not work in the mines, he saw formal education as the route to their advancement. Henry was the seventh of 8 children in a family that often struggled with poverty. He attended infant and elementary schools in Castleford, where he began modeling in clay and carving in wood. He professed to have decided to become a sculptor when he was 11 after hearing of Michelangelo's achievements at a Sunday school reading. On his second attempt he was accepted at Castleford Grammar School, where his headmaster soon noticed his talent and interest in medieval sculpture, and which several of his siblings had attended. His art teacher broadened his knowledge of art, and, with her encouragement, he determined to make art his career, first by sitting for examinations for a scholarship to the local art college. Despite his early promise, Moore's parents had been against him training as a sculptor, a vocation they considered manual labor with few career prospects. After a brief introduction as a student teacher, Moore became a teacher at the school he had attended. Upon turning 18, Moore volunteered for army service. He was the youngest man in the Prince of Wales's own civil service rifles regiment and was injured in 1917 in a gas attack on the 30th of November at Bourlon Wood, during the Battle of Cambrai. After recovering in hospital, he saw out the remainder of the war as a physical training instructor, only returning to France as the armistice was signed. He recalled later, "For me the war passed in a romantic haze of trying to be a hero." This attitude changed as he reflected on the destructiveness of war, and in 1940 he wrote that, a year or two after the war, the sight of a khaki uniform began to mean everything in life that was wrong and wasteful and anti-life. And I still have that feeling. Beginnings as a sculptor. After the war, Moore received an ex-serviceman's grant to continue his education, and in 1919 he became a student at the Leeds School of Art, which set up a sculpture studio especially for him. At the college, he met Barbara Hepworth, a fellow student who would also become a well-known British sculptor, and began a friendship and gentle professional rivalry that lasted for many years. In Leeds, Moore also had access to the modernist works in the collection of Sir Michael Sadler, the university vice-chancellor, which had a pronounced effect on his development. In 1921, Moore won a scholarship to study at the Royal College of Art in London, along with Hepworth and other Yorkshire contemporaries. While in London, Moore extended his knowledge of primitive art and sculpture, studying the ethnographic collections at the Victoria and Albert Museum and the British Museum. The student sculptures of both Moore and Hepworth followed the standard Romantic Victorian style, and included natural forms, landscapes and figurative modelling of animals. Moore later became uncomfortable with classically derived ideals. His later familiarity with primitivism and the influence of sculptors such as Constantin Brancusi, Jacob Epstein, Henry Gaudier-Brazeska and Frank Dobson led him to the method of direct carving, in which imperfections in the material and marks left by tools became part of the finished sculpture. Having adopted this technique, Moore was in conflict with academic tutors who did not appreciate such a modern approach. During one exercise set by Derwent Wood, Moore was asked to reproduce a marble relief of Domenico Rosali's The Virgin and Child by first modeling the relief in plaster, then reproducing it in marble using the mechanical aid known as a pointing machine, a technique called pointing. Instead, he carved the relief directly, even marking the surface to simulate the prick marks that would have been left by the pointing machine. In 1924, Moore won a 6-month traveling scholarship which he spent in northern Italy studying the great works of Michelangelo, Giotto di Bondone, Giovanni Pisano and several other old masters. During this period he also visited Paris, took advantage of the timed sketching classes at the Accademia Carrara, and viewed, in the Trocadero, a plaster cast of a Toltec Maya sculptural form, the Chacmuel, previously seen in book illustrations. The reclining figure was to have a profound effect upon Moore's work, becoming the primary motif of his sculpture. Hampstead. On returning to London, Moore undertook a 7-year teaching post at the Royal College of Art. He was required to work 2 days a week, which allowed him time to spend on his own work. His first public commission, West Wind, was one of the 8 reliefs of the 4 winds high on the walls of London Underground's headquarters at 55 Broadway. The other winds were carved by contemporary sculptors including Eric Gill with the ground-level pieces provided by Epstein. In July 1929, Moore married Irina Radetzky, a painting student at the Royal College. Irina was born in Kyiv in 1907 to Ukrainian-Polish parents. Her father did not return from the Russian Revolution and her mother was evacuated to Paris where she married a British Army officer. Irina was smuggled to Paris a year later and went to school there until she was 16, after which she was sent to live with her stepfather's relatives in Buckinghamshire. Irina found security in her marriage to Moore and was soon posing for him. Shortly after they married, the couple moved to a studio in Hampstead at 11A Park Hill Road NW3, joining a small colony of avant-garde artists who were taking root there. Shortly afterward, Hepworth and her second husband Ben Nicholson moved into a studio around the corner from Moore, while Naum Gabo, Roland Penrose, Cecil Stevenson and the art critic Herbert Reed also lived in the area. This led to a rapid cross-fertilization of ideas that Reed would publicize, helping to raise Moore's public profile. The area was also a stopping-off point for many refugee artists, architects and designers from continental Europe en route to America, some of whom would later commission works from Moore. In 1932, after 6 years teaching at the Royal College, Moore took up a post as the head of the Department of Sculpture at the Chelsea School of Art. Artistically, Moore, Hepworth and other members of the 7 and 5 Society would develop steadily more abstract work, partly influenced by their frequent trips to Paris and their contact with leading progressive artists, notably Pablo Picasso, Georges Braque, Jean Arp and Alberto Giacometti. Moore flirted with Surrealism, joining Paul Nash's modern art movement, Unit 1, in 1933. In 1934, Moore visited Spain. He visited the Cave of Altamira, Madrid, Toledo and Pamplona. Moore and Nash were on the organizing committee of the International Surrealist Exhibition, which took place in London in 1936. The work proved controversial with other residents and the local press ran a campaign against the piece over the next 2 years. At this time Moore gradually transitioned from direct carving to casting in bronze, modeling preliminary maquettes in clay or plaster rather than making preparatory drawings. Second World War. At the outbreak of the Second World War, the Chelsea School of Art was evacuated to Northampton and Moore resigned his teaching post. During the war, Moore produced powerful drawings of Londoners sleeping in the London Underground while sheltering from the Blitz. Kenneth Clark, the chairman of the War Artists Advisory Committee, WAAC, had previously tried to recruit Moore as a full-time salaried war artist and now agreed to purchase some of the shelter drawings and issued contracts for further examples. The shelter drawings WAAC acquired were completed between the autumn of 1940 and the spring of 1941 and are regarded as among the finest products of the WAAC scheme. In August 1941, WAAC commissioned Moore to draw miners working underground at the Welldale Colliery in Yorkshire, where his father had worked at the start of the century. Moore drew the people in the shelters as passively waiting the all clear while miners aggressively worked the coal faces. These drawings helped to boost Moore's international reputation, particularly in America, where examples were included in the WAAC Britain at War exhibition, which toured North America throughout the war. After their Hampstead home was hit by bomb shrapnel in September 1940, Moore and Irina moved out of London to live in a farmhouse called Hoglands in the hamlet of Perry Green near Muchadam, Hertfordshire. This was to become Moore's home and workshop for the rest of his life. Despite acquiring significant wealth later in life, Moore never felt the need to move to larger premises and, apart from the addition of a number of outbuildings and studios, the house changed little over the years. In 1943 he received a commission from the Church of St. Matthew, Northampton, to carve a Madonna and Child. This sculpture was the first in an important series of family group sculptures. Later years. After the war and following several earlier miscarriages, Irina gave birth to their daughter, Mary Moore, in March 1946. The child was named after Moore's mother, who had died 2 years earlier. Both the loss of his mother and the arrival of a baby focused Moore's mind on the family, which he expressed in his work by producing many mother and child compositions. Although reclining and external figures also remained popular. In the same year, Moore made his first visit to America when a retrospective exhibition of his work opened at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. From the late 1930s, Kenneth Clark became an unlikely but influential champion of Moore's work, and through his position as member of the Arts Council of Great Britain he secured exhibitions and commissions for the artist. Before the war, Moore had been approached by educator Henry Morris, who was trying to reform education with his concept of the village college. Morris had engaged Walter Gropius as the architect for his second village college at Impington near Cambridge, and he wanted Moore to design a major public sculpture for the site. The county council, however, could not afford Gropius's full design, and scaled back the project when Gropius emigrated to America. Lacking funds, Morris had to cancel Moore's sculpture, which had not progressed beyond the maquette stage. Moore was able to reuse the design in 1950 for a similar commission outside a secondary school for the new town of Stevenage. This time, the project was completed and Family Group became Moore's first large-scale public bronze. In the 1950s, Moore began to receive increasingly significant commissions, including a reclining figure for the UNESCO building in Paris in 1958, with many more public works of art. The scale of Moore's sculptures grew significantly and he started to employ an increasing number of assistants to work with him at Muchadam, including Anthony Caro and Richard Wentworth. On the campus of the University of Chicago in December 1967, 25 years to the minute after the team of physicists led by Enrico Fermi achieved the first controlled, self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction, Moore's nuclear energy was unveiled on the site of what was once the university's football field stands, in the rackets court beneath which the experiments had taken place. This 12-foot-tall piece in the middle of a large, open plaza is often thought to represent a mushroom cloud topped by a massive human skull. But Moore's interpretation was very different. He once told a friend that he hoped viewers would go around it, looking out through the open spaces, and that they may have a feeling of being in a cathedral. In Chicago, Illinois, Moore also commemorated science with a large bronze sundial. Locally named Man Enters the Cosmos, which was commissioned to recognize the space exploration program. The last 3 decades of Moore's life continued in a similar vein. Several major retrospectives took place around the world. Notably, a very prominent exhibition in the summer of 1972 in the grounds of the Forte di Belvedere overlooking Florence. Following the pioneering documentary, Henry Moore, produced by John Reed in 1951, he appeared in many films. In 1964, for instance, Moore was featured in the documentary, 5 British Sculptors, by American filmmaker Warren Former. By the end of the 1970s, there were some 40 exhibitions a year featuring his work. According to Moore, when I was offered the site near the House of Lords, I liked the place so much that I didn't bother to go and see an alternative site in Hyde Park. One lonely sculpture can be lost in a large park. The House of Lords site is quite different. It is next to a path where people walk, and it has a few seats where they can sit and contemplate it. As his wealth grew, Moore began to worry about his legacy. With the help of his daughter Mary, he set up the Henry Moore Trust in 1972, with a view to protecting his estate from death duties. By 1977, he was paying close to £1 million a year in income tax. To mitigate his tax burden, he established the Henry Moore Foundation as a registered charity with Irena and Mary as trustees. The foundation was established to encourage the public appreciation of the visual arts and especially the works of Moore. It now runs his house and estate at Perry Green, with a gallery, sculpture park and studios. In 1979, Henry Moore became abruptly known in Germany when his sculpture Large Two Forms was installed in the forecourt of the German Chancellery in Bonn.